Oh, you maybe mute it for right now, and that way
Yeah.
when Sarah talks, it doesn't make it.
Yeah. We don't get the feed. Then first, I'm gonna make you the host. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Good to go. Sweet. So I think everyone saw the email that Jules is still here, supporting, just like stepping back from presenting tonight. So we're kind of splitting up a bit how we're sharing, but I'll just kind of share our agenda for tonight. As well as a couple like logistic things that we had that we wanted to share about, like how we're sharing articles back and forth. Mostly just because we're getting into like some weeds of like longer ones, so. But for tonight, we wanted to share the articles that we plan to open, so we have that list ready to go. We also had a couple questions about Article 1, so we can take it to caucus time and discuss. And then we have a proposal ready for Article 6 on working conditions, which is fairly big, so we'll each kind of go down the line and share what some of those proposals are. And while we're doing that, we were gonna, I think Rebecca just sent those proposal documents to you all, and we just thought we could have those on the screen, so that way everyone can read it or on their personal computer, and we can just kind of go through it together if that works okay. I think those are the main things. Did I miss anything, team?
Just that we added comment access, so we were going through it and we had been pretty we had made it a priority to do paper exchanges, but because our sessions are kind of condensed, it is a little bit of a time crunch. So what we're thinking is if we TA on something, we print it and sign it, but that we're comfortable doing some shared documents and having comments on it. Not even, it doesn't even have to be formal, like counters, but like if you have like feedback or questions, we can kind of track it, and then whatever's printed once we reach a TA won't have any of that. Does that work for you all?
Yes, and we're still gonna want to talk about things.
Oh, yeah,
For
totally.
sure.
Yes, yes, definitely.
But just,
I think we might also still like, we might, if we're like, if we were to go to caucus and have some things, we might still come back with like our own language.
Oh, yes, 100%. Yes, I think we were thinking like whatever the proposal is that someone is presenting, we can look at it together on the big screen. So you would have a for sure. Stuff, yeah.
Was there anything else that admin had that they wanted to talk about?
No, it was just confirming what we still, so we have 1, 7, and 8 still
Yes.
open. Sounds like we're gonna have 6 open. And then we are ready with basically to open 16, 17, and 18, but not share a like written proposal. It's more just Rocco's gonna
Yeah.
bring me about what 20-ish
Yeah.
meeting minutes.
Yep.
For him to kind of walk through that. We do have paper copies of 2 documents associated with what he's gonna share. And then that's as far as opening articles, that's it for us.
Perfect. I guess since that's it for you all, and we had note of that already from your email, so we can share the list that we have right now with you all. So we mentioned 6, and this is ones that we haven't already talked about. So we have Article 6 that we'll talk about tonight. Article 9 on professional development, we would like to open. Article 10 11, 12, Article 13, and 15. And 15, a lot of that is, we put stuff from, we added it to that section, so some of the stuff got rearranged into Article 15, so. So basically 9 through 15 with the exception of 14. 14, we had talked about earlier. We don't have any edits that we feel like need to be made to that, so if you all are ready to close on it, we would be ready to close on that tonight. So. That is our list.
I think what I can do, I had 14 on the list for clerical, but I'll just double check to see if they're,
Okay.
if they're not even worth it, then we could print it and bring it back after caucus.
Sure. Yeah. And I think we'd be ready to TA that tonight if there's no big changes. Okay. If that's, so that's the list that we have, or would it be okay if we shared our questions about Article 1 that we had? So we kind of had 3 main ones that we wanted to ask about. I'm just gonna open my notes. It was about temporary employees. So we were kind of wondering, and I don't know if it's in the RFI, but is there a number of how many temporary employees we have right now?
I wouldn't have to go and pull it on there, particularly just because I couldn't think of the difference between licensed one to TPs.
Oh, that's true,
Licensed on
that's
there.
true,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because
Okay.
we do have classified and administrative teams too. so
Yeah.
I can have-
We could get that number for you.
Okay. Awesome. So that was one question. And team, stop me or interrupt me if I'm missing stuff. The other question, well, it's probably related to that, is we were kind of curious on the length of employment some of the temporary employees have been employed for. And you had kind of mentioned it, Christina, but we were just maybe hoping you could reiterate. The temporary employees, are those usually to fill like specific gaps in employment, or are they more like grant-based?
Oftentimes they're grant-based or something has changed mid-year or we've hired late, The thing with grants, especially ODE grants, is that, we're not gonna go out and hire somebody until ODE actually says, here's your money, go spend it. And that oftentimes puts us into a school year. And so we don't necessarily hire someone on a permanent basis at that point. Unless we know it's gonna be a position that's gonna be around. So the example I gave was, we have the Grow Your Own grant. And we knew initially that it was only a 2-year grant. And there was no guarantee that there would be money past that. And so we hired that as a TP. So that person has been in that job as a TP for 2 years. If there have been grants in the past. So the FSLs way back in the day were all hired as TPEs because they were funded by a big SAMHSA grant. And then over the years, districts saw the value of those positions. And so they were transitioned into permanent positions because the funding for it became a regular thing. And so I think that's the intent for us, is that as an agency, we are always seeking out other funding sources because, there's only so much that comes from the state. And so, but a lot of time, those funding sources, especially if it's new kinds of things that we're doing, are very limited duration. And until we hear that like, oh, yes, that's gonna happen again, and it's gonna happen, so we're doing TPEs primarily for grant-based things. Or just weird things that happen with hiring people mid-year or people leaving mid-year. Would you agree? Is that?
Covering absences.
Yeah.
Absences.
I think that's pretty much what we've used them for.
Okay. Did anyone else have questions about that? And when you share the number of temporary employees, is it possible to know the length that they've been employed as well? That was another question we had.
Yeah, I mean, it's, we have to go back and pull the
Yeah.
contracts on there because it's
Yeah.
not sitting in the system
Yeah.
where it has like
Yeah.
a higher date on it, so
Yeah.
we have to go through each individual contract and see.
That might be longer we could get you a number faster than we could, like their length of being a TP.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers are a great starting point too, and the big reason we asked too is just because we have some potential. Things about like the length of those employment that we'd like to see in the contract, so.
I do know, Joe, like, cause, and I can speak from this when I was a director and like the FSLs, like I've had a lot of conversations with them that back in the day, they remained TPDs long for, multiple years. And I don't see us hiring that way more recently. Like, if we know that there's a way to make the position a permanent position, we're moving that direction.
Okay. And is there like a maximum length that they can be temporary employees currently? Just because it's so.
Yeah.
Dependent.
It's true, I mean, that's the whole point, I think there was, the language experimental, like it really allows us the flexibility to try something. And then, if the funding doesn't work out, or it's just not a good fit sometimes we've done services or had ideas around services that ultimately our districts are like, yeah, that's not actually what we need, or we don't need that anymore, we need something else. So it's really for that trial period with something new versus existing positions. I mean, we're gonna try to hire people into contract positions as much as we can.
And we also don't want to, GYO is a great example, tell someone, hey, come work for us. Oh, sorry, in 2 years, you're gonna lose your job because the money ran out. So in those instances, them knowing upfront that this is only gonna last for a certain period of time is the right thing to do for people when they make choices about jobs.
Sweet. Okay, I think that's a good start for that one. We'll probably take that to our caucus to discuss it. Rebecca, that was the main thing I was gonna talk about. I may pass some to Rebecca while I take notes, just because I'm not that multifaceted. So,
Specifically on the temporary.
yeah,
Yeah, I think we might have a couple of additional questions, when we caucus that we'll ask. I think we're trying to get a better sense of the scope of like how often they're used, for how long. Where are there areas where y'all really do need that flexibility, and where is it kind of getting to a point where it's bargaining unit work, and there might need to be some more of that contained, because typically it is, and we get that an ESD operates differently than a district. We definitely understand that, but most of our collective bargaining agreements do have some parameters around temporary employees. We're just not seeing that here, so I think we're happy to take a step back and kind of ask these questions more from a point of like, let's wrap all of our heads around it and see what makes sense. But that's our approach right now, is like, let's step back and kind of get a better sense of the whole scope of it, like the different departments, the length, the grant stuff, and see if we can come up with something that feels more structured, which is, we may or may not see eye to eye on, but at least trying to get as much information for us to look at, so that we're being thoughtful in what we're asking for too. So.
I think the next thing we want to do is share our proposal for Article 6. And then maybe. Do we feel okay about sharing our proposal for 6 and then going into some caucus time after that, just because it's pretty large, and then we can figure out a time based on how long it all is. So we're kind of going down the line and each kind of sharing on different sections. So I think Jules is going to start.
Yeah, I'll start. The first changes we have here on our first page here in A. We are just matching a calendar that's been missing, and I think in a previously like in recognition, that's there as well. So just making sure that matches. And then further down on B here. This one is just a repetition, for clarity of, language that we've TA'd, around new employee orientation. So our new employee orientation language. Just as kind of a reminder for anyone that reads that section, if you need more information, pop back up and find it. Am I doing, the ones in 21?
Yeah.
On 21 here. Okay, yeah, I'm seeing it here. We're just adding yearly calendars, just, kind of clarification within that sentence when we were reading it before. It wasn't super clear and the way we were reading it was like, is this talking about daily schedules, that kind of thing? Could it be interpreted that way? So just being super clear, it's about those yearly calendars. And also kind of building in that, there's like a collaborative process around changes to that. And right, that's something between, the request of an employee and the approval of a supervisor. I think before it was just approved by, the program supervisor, which sort of left room for if they want to change your schedule, they can. So that's making it clear. It's like, there's a request as a part of that. And then down here. I can't remember the context for
It was blank.
July. Yeah, that's right. That's right. The language was just missing a word. I don't know if it was lost just in the formatting, or maybe y'all caught it when you were doing your clerical pass too, but yeah, the month was missing, so now the month is there. And I think F. Is F just matching that calendar, or can someone?
Except I think we weren't 100% sure if that was exactly correct, so I need to check on it. Because we didn't know the exact dates of the 220-day calendar, and if that matches. All I knew was that like EI specialists who work during summer are on that calendar, and that is their calendar. But yeah, we were just trying to reflect the same thing that was listed above for the 190-day employees. We just want to have a paragraph in there filling for the 220s. And we don't know where the 200s fall.
I think that's my slides. Thanks for helping.
There's just some process in that first part of the needs some change to commute time and commute distance to reflect some issues and concerns that members are having related to that. So open to your questions. And then adjusted schedule. Almost just to reflect needs of our membership as well as the clientele that we serve.
Closure conditions, the first change there were some concerns brought by members about using scheduled personal or sick leave and then having something like a snow day or something like that, and that time not being deducted from their bank. Some language added around being able to request working from home. We just reworded that a bit. More about those days when they've used personal emergency leave time for weather-related absences. And then a closure is used, a closure day is held, then that time will also not be charged in full for that day.
And H through M is some new language. I'll just read the kind of headlines there. So we've got classroom staffing, some caseload information. We've also got, underneath the table, we've got some information about like what happens when limits are exceeded. Some time carved out for IFSP, IEP developing and monitoring. So planning time, and then Medicaid billing. And we've also got, those people that are billing Medicare specialists that are generating Medicare dollars, that's how that's for certification. Use. And then response to adverse health and safety incident. So, I mean, you guys can read this, but this is basically, we want to make sure that our employees are taking care of themselves, our members are taking care of themselves and co-workers. So just that, let's see. And then a personal expression, when we are writing and speaking in our personal capacity, that we may identify ourselves as an ESD employee, but as long as we're saying, we're not representing you guys, that we're still allowed to exercise our personal expression. Yeah.
The big one.
Oh, and then the section that's crossed out is the section that got moved.
Yeah.
Vacancies just didn't really fit in working conditions. And so it's moved more with hiring, transferring,
Recall.
Layoff.
layoff and recall. Yeah, it has a giant title now. So it's not crossed off because we're getting rid of the language, but just because it got moved.
That's
It's a new.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an existing article that we're adding onto.
Yeah. How long? Thank you. Well, I know that's a huge. Eve, how long do you all want?
So 6:30, we can come back.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good.
When we get back, are we hearing Rocco's?
And we're gonna talk in caucus and figure out what, we'll come back and.
Sounds
Sweet.
I'm sitting in.
Yep. Almost. Yeah. You sharing your piece first, Rebecca?
Yeah.
About the email.
Yes. So we just emailed over an RFI. And it is around the, requesting a list of like temporary or contract employees. So essentially, who are the employees right now who are being paid that are licensed, but they're not considered part of our bargaining unit? They're not supervisors, they're not confidential, so we can kind of see the scope of how many folks are there, how long have they been working at the ESD? What are their positions? Because, you know, we presented language around temporary employees and it looked like that was not, you know, something that you all were saying, yes, let's TA off on that. So I think that's where we want to do the reset and say, okay, let's work off some more information that helps us better understand the different programs or departments they're in or funding sources. It's a lot of information and we recognize that. So we're fine with like, however, my 3-4 weeks. How long reasonably do you think you might need to compile that information? We were hoping by May 1st, but I think even up till May 10th would probably be fine. And then if there's questions around the columns of information that we asked for, if you want to give us feedback on that. But that contains the information that we think would be most useful to us. Any questions right off the bat about that RFI?
So for TPs, I think we could pull this information fairly easy.
Okay.
If you're talking about contract house folks, they're not our employees. We just pay the contract house.
Okay,
So we wouldn't have some of this information because we just pay the contract house for the
okay.
employee.
So I think the information that you could provide to us would maybe be like, how many of them are, where
We
they were,
did in the original.
they're in the original RFI. Okay,
Yeah.
that's great.
Okay,
Yes, I think there's a couple pieces that we're looking for, but we could just maybe email back and forth and kind of like nail that down.
Yeah.
Okay,
But like-
Just a quick question about, the list who are not categorized as bargaining unit, but so there are some licensed employees who are not part of the bargaining units.
Yes.
Versus the temporaries who aren't part. Which.
Yeah.
What do you,
So they're. Ones that are not eligible versus ones that are
Yes.
just choosing not to be.
Yeah.
thank you.
well, no, yeah, not the ones we're not choosing. So
Okay.
represented would mean whether they're a member or not, they're
Okay.
technically represented by us.
Yes.
And we're their
Yes.
legal bargaining
Just,
representative,
I
but
just wanted to.
yeah.
To double check that.
So we're kind of like, who is not in management and who is not a confidential employee, but is doing work that is licensed employee work,
Yeah.
and we recognize some of them won't be in the unit, right? Our goal here is not to like advocate for all of them to be in our unit, but we're trying to get a better sense of information so that our proposals essentially make sense to you all. That makes sense. Yeah, that's it on that.
Would admin like to share any what concerns or things about Article 6? We know that was a lot. And we were just kind of hoping to hear concerns or things like that. We'll probably take those to caucus, but yeah.
So you actually, so we were gonna start with Article 1.
Okay.
Around just asking some more questions about the TPE part, but you just did it. with
Okay.
the So that was done.
Okay.
So we'll work on pulling that together, and if we have questions, we can do some clarification. for you. But I just want to confirm it's licensed. Employees that would be licensed eligible.
Yes.
Essentially, that aren't TPs, and then contract house what we can pull together for that. That's,
Well, and ones that are temporary, yeah. So that would
those are our
include-
TPs.
Yeah, oh yeah, sorry, I thought you were saying
Yeah.
not temp, not TPC, yeah.
Yeah. My question on Article 6 is on page 3, under 3, just some clarification. On line 20, these 2 days, are you, so right now, the way it's designed, a new employee that starts at the beginning of the year gets the extra 2 days in their contract. Are you asking for an extra 2 days for somebody that starts mid-year as well? Or is that a prorated, like if somebody starts in December?
What can you tell us about 2 days? How it works right now, when a new employee gets hired
In
in
the middle of the year?
December?
We're working on that. It really is, it is program by program, how that rolls out. So I can speak from my experience as a program director. I had some really clear time set aside when the new employee starts. They have a learning plan that they kind of work through. We give them time to do their safe schools, so we build in time for them to get to know the work assignment, those kinds of things. It doesn't necessarily happen in 2 full days. It might be spread out over a week or 2. So I can speak from our program, like when I was a director, that's what we would do. I think it varies a little bit right now, program by program. I couldn't speak for what the other programs do. I think with the addition of what we added about some sort of orientation, I think it's gonna allow us to do a little more structure around that for employees, because if it's a half day, and Jules and I had actually talked about, we're already gonna start talking about what this will look like next year. So say we had a half day in the morning, that's the orientation. And then we said to the administrators, use the afternoon for some additional stuff for your program. That would guarantee, somewhat of a day at least for that person. But I couldn't tell you what it looks like right now. I mean, I could do some asking about what that looks like and bring that back. And just get some input from the other program directors of how they manage that.
Just kind of to clarify, kind of put it on the table, I think the interest of the association here is to have as equivalent an experience as possible. In recognition that some folks that have been hired mid-year, they get a much more trial by fire
Yeah.
experience and things.
Literally.
And I guess it's maybe not the exact number of days, but it's about providing the same experience. If for someone who's hired over the summer, if that denotes 2 days, I think we should look at what's happening and figure out what is important to make sure is happening as well.
Yeah.
For someone who happens to be hired during the year. And I think part of that is addressed with the monthly
Yeah.
piece of things, which would probably fall within that time.
I could come back with just a little more information from the other programs of how they manage a mid-year hire and what that looks like for them and bring them back.
It's a concern that some members have shared.
Yeah.
That have been hired mid-year and how they just felt like they didn't get an equivalent orientation.
Yeah.
Okay, I need some clarification on page 5 under E, commute distance. So I'm not quite sure at what we're getting at here, and I don't know how much it's the heading, maybe not lining up with the verbiage. So we're under commute distance, and then we're talking about miles traveled for work purposes. And I need clarification as to which one we're talking about. Federally, you are not allowed to reimburse somebody for commute. That is, it's taxable income if you do that on there, so I need some clarification on what you're actually looking for there. Are you talking commuting, or is this just supposed to be a different heading? And then, in the next piece you have there, employees have been asked in the past to pay for work mileage out of their own personal funds. I'd be looking for an example of what that actually is, because again, I don't have an idea of what we're getting at here or what kind of magnitude it would be. So some kind of clarification around there. And then to be paid no later than June 30th, 2025. Was that the intended date that's supposed to be on here? And finally on there as well, another federal taxation requirement on there. Any mileage paid out beyond 30 days is not reimbursement anymore, it's taxable income. So we couldn't do anything beyond a 60-day window. It has to become taxable income federally. So I kind of need that scoped in.
So we're gonna document those questions and then we'll come back with some responses, but I just want to open it up for some sharing of the concerns that led to writing up this language. And I think there's different ways to address it, but the big thing here that I think the team and the membership wanted to convey is that there's a lot of issues happening right now with going between different work sites and feeling like personal vehicles are almost like being treated as like company cars. And that people aren't being appropriately reimbursed for mileage within the context of the workday. So here you on the feedback about the commute, but within the workday, or workdays extending past regular working hours due to having work sites pretty far out. So I'm gonna we're definitely taking note of those questions, hear you on the commute verbiage. And then I want to just turn to folks on the team too, if anyone wants to share a little bit more in depth of some of what you're hearing from coworkers or experiencing for yourself.
I think some of the issue comes from the practice we have where we assign a home base that is not LVL. So if someone works at a different site more than 3 days, that's their home base. And then that mileage between their home and that offsite, we'll call it place, doesn't get reimbursed. So it's called their commute, but really everyone works here and this is headquarters. And I think people have, where they choose to live, they choose that in relation to here, especially since work placements can vary. So you don't really know year to year how far away your commute is going to be. And I think members kind of wanted this to be the home base, like regardless of where you are, then that commute time based on where you've chosen to live will always get deducted from wherever you're going. So that part hopefully would solve the issues you had mentioned, but they're still getting reimbursed for any like extra distance, especially members that work at really far away.
Okay. It would be great if you could put that in with a response so I can see the entirety of it on there and get my hands around this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hopefully that was clear.
And I think another one that's come up too, is when commuting involves, like, especially if you're commuting to a district really far away, a lot of time, so like Pearl, for example, her start time at the school is 8, but it takes a little over an hour to get to LC, right? And so or like I was in Central in the last 2 years before this year, so school starts at 8 and I have to be ready to see students starting at 8. And so that means I'm having to kind of make up for that time in that commute time. And again, following up to what Sarah was saying, that's not time that I'm being paid during that time. So I'm commuting, right? But I'm expected to be at the school at a certain time. So like the other alternative that I would see to that was, well, I just leave at 8, but then I show up at 8:30, but that impacts my duties, and I wouldn't want to do that to students or anything like that, of course. So I think that was another intent that we had, was that some employees are having to add that additional time for work in that commute. And then again, for us specifically, like in the C's department, those can change year to year, so we don't necessarily have a guarantee that I'm always gonna be in GAPS or LC or whatever it is. So,
We've got your questions noted.
great, thank you.
I think that here's our.
That was our Article 6.
Yeah. So we're gonna take some time with the rest of Article 6 on there. We'll come back at a later time.
Okay.
Okay, and that will bring us to, if you were all ready for it on there, I'm gonna walk through some more financial information to help us get into the economics. So give me just a moment here to connect it and share. Um,
While you're doing that, Rocco, can I just read back what you had asked? So,
yes,
commute time versus commute distance, just seeing that clarified. A statement about if we could have an example of employees who've had to pay for mileage out of their own funds.
Mhm.
Clarity around the deadline that was presented, and then clarity around mileage being paid out beyond 30 days, right? Is that everything?
yes, and just to be super clear on here, you can't put it under their heading of commute time, it'll instantly make it illegal.
Okay,
Versus field, like driving
No,
within.
Yeah,
the
gotta describe it in something other than
Yeah.
commute.
Field,
Driving.
Field.
Yeah.
30 or 60 days.
It's 60 days, sorry, 60 days, anything beyond 60 days is not reimbursement, it's taxable income.
thank you.
Okay. So, what I want to do here, so previously we went through sort of a high level as to what's going on with the ESD. So that we could see what's likely going to happen with roll-up costs on sort of a macro basis. We're coming down to more the economics of it on there, and as we said before, everything is paid out of distinct budgets that are not able to be crossed over. So when we think about this on here, we need to think about it as separate funding sources. And we want to be as transparent as possible in this process. So what I'm going to walk you through is the tool that we're going to be using in order to examine the impacts that any economic proposals would have on any given unit. So I'm gonna, it's a little bit of an iterative thing, so I gotta pick a place in the middle to start. And so I'm gonna pop here onto the sort of operating statements. Before I get into it, as we look at what we're looking at for economics, we have 3 basic goals in mind that we want to be mindful of. So the first thing is we want to make sure that we are maintaining competitive compensation. The second thing, we want to make sure that we are sustaining program operations and obligations. So to be clear about what I mean in that, we need to both make sure that we can deliver the services that we are obligated to do. But we also have to make it sustainable in a way that we are not asking people to do it by taking on inordinate loads of work, right? We have to be mindful that, you know, a cost on one side of the equation has an impact on another side of the equation. And then the third thing on there is to preserve the affordability for our districts. And I'm going to go into exactly what we mean by that in a little bit more detail as we look at the independent funding sources that are in here. Okay, so let's see what we have up on the screen here. What I have is a model built out for each one of our main funding sources. So here's tier 1. These are the 3 components that make up tier 2. We'll look at tier 2 as a whole. Then we have the major grants that we have, and you have one person paid on something that is other than one of the major grants. These are all the places in the ESD that licensed personnel are paid from. We have other things as well, but they're not pertinent to our conversation here. So how this is set up to help us through, we're gonna track the total revenue that we have available for any funding source, and we'll go through that in a little bit more detail as well. And then we're gonna do a full cost workup for what does each one of these places cost us. So I'm gonna start with what is down here. So these are non-payroll costs. So what we do is we go through each one of the obligations and we say, what are our obligations in tier one for non-payroll costs? So for instance, you'll see this $1.1 million of software. We buy and maintain the software for Infinite Visions and Synergy for our districts, right? It's a requirement that they have of us on there, along with some other software packages as well. So we have 1,000,001 of obligations there for software that are just baked into our obligations with our districts, right? You'll also see things on there like travel, right? We reimburse people travel on there and we have to bake in what it's actually going to cost to reimburse travel. And we will have things on here like transits. So part of what we do with the tier one budget is we forward $1.3 million of the budget directly to our districts to help alleviate costs for students with severe disabilities. That's something we do each year. We spread out the portions. So for each one of the programs we have in here, all of the numbers that are below payroll costs are our current estimates of what next year is going to cost. So we've already gone through and done the due diligence of what's going up in costs, what sorts of things can we pare back and get rid of. These are really tight numbers for us for next year. And again, I'm going to focus on tier one, but it's, there we go. It's the same thing for all of the other programs out here as well. We've gone through and costed out, what we need for EIECSE, which would include things like our rent charges and our utilities and other things that we have out there. Okay, so then we have sort of the largest component of what our expenditures are, and that is our payroll and related costs. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom here. And what we're essentially going to do is we're going to take the FTE that we have on each one of our grouped categories on here. So for licensed, classified, and administration, we have our FTE that's on there. And then we will have how much those cost us on an hourly basis. So we kind of convert this into hours, we multiply those through, and we say, this is how much it's going to cost us in wages. The FTE that you're seeing on here, this is as close as we can get to continuing exactly what we did this year into next year. There are some nuances that means that is not exactly translatable. So for instance, we have some availability on grants this year that is carrying some things that are tier one like. Next year, we have to carry that same labor. We have to bring it onto tier one because we won't have the availability of the grant. But the labor you're seeing on here is essentially, if you're the person working in this area on here, you would notice like, yeah, that's about how many colleagues I have around to carry the workload with me. Okay. Coming up here, so we have estimates baked in already for all the step increases and a reasonable amount of COLA for classified administrator salaries. The license salaries that you're seeing in here, this is tied out to detailed calculations. So in here, I have every single one of the members of the association on here. I have everybody at their current steps. I have everybody at their current rates. I have everybody at their current FTE. This right now, because nothing else is baked in, says, what would that cost me if you got nothing different next year, right? So all the same hours, same exact rate, no steps, no COLA. Okay, everybody with me so far? All right, and then down here, the last piece of it on here, we're going to add in those associated payroll costs. So we have to pay PERS, we have to pay Social Security, the employer pay taxes on there, and then health insurance on there as well. This is the cost of the insurance cap. So if you're looking in total, the tier one estimate for labor is that 11.8 million. So The punchline to this is we take the $15.5 million that we have up here. We take all of our costs in the system and we say that's 15.86, meaning we are in a deficit of $367,000 in the tier 1 fund. Okay, and you'll see right now before I have things baked in, you'll see deficits in tier 2, you'll see a little bit of availability on EIECSE, and sort of so on and so forth. A very large deficit in SPSS grants. We can revisit this at any time you want and go through these costs in a little bit more detail. But what I want to bring you to is as we roll up and as we look how things are going to cost in here. So let's look at the high level funding.
Can you make
These,
that just a wee bit bigger?
oh yeah, sure, sorry.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good call.
Stare at these numbers all week long, so when you need them. Okay, so what we'd be seeing here, these are our current funding estimates that you'll see for each one of it on there. We're gonna publish our budget for next year, should hit our website on May 1st. This is essentially the numbers that you're gonna see us publish. They are our best estimates as to what we have available. So you'll see right now, before we do anything with licensed salaries on there, we have to source $970,000 worth of cuts. To be clear, we have sourced many of these already. If you've been following along with Jason's emails, you'll see he said, we know this is coming on here, it would be irresponsible for us to wait. And we have gone through, we've made some changes. That is mostly the changes that you have seen have been in administrative staff and in classified staff. So some of those are baked in, but we want to make sure that we understand how much different operations would be year over year when we're looking at these. Okay, other than that, most of this is fairly straightforward into how we would add COLA and steps in here. There is one item I want to go through though, prior to any of that. And that is one proposal that we want to make sure we have on the table for this year, and that is the SLP conversion. So right now, you know, we have separate schedules for occupational and physical therapists on there. Part of what we want to bake into this is moving the SLPs to that same schedule. And the reason that we're looking to do that is sort of multifaceted, but all sort of centers around the same area. We are having a lot of difficulty attracting and retaining SLPs. They are in incredibly high demand right now. If you look at the labor statistic projections for the next decade as to where it's going to go, it is only going to get tighter and tighter. In order for us to be competitive in that space, to be able to attract and retain SLPs, we believe that we need to move them to that same schedule. The other thing we're going to note, this is of a shared interest. If you look at our contract house labor, by far the biggest chunk of contract house labor we have right now is in SLPs, and we run into several problems with that. The more contract labor we get from a labor house, the more expensive it becomes because they know that we really need it. The rates just keep moving up on us. So we don't particularly like that. It decreases our stability. So that is something we definitely want both for our districts and for colleagues on there to know that you have, you know, people inside of your organization working towards the same goals. So we want it there as well. And also, it is just operationally burdensome. It is difficult to manage the contract house stuff, and we would like to do as little of it as possible. And again, we think that aligns with what you're looking for anyway. So first thing I'm going to do on here is I'm going to plug in doing the SLP conversion. So as we look over here, you'll see there are no license wages being added to it. As I add in the SLP conversion, you'll see that is a $90,000 increase in wages. I'm going to pop over here for just a second. So as we look at this, this is
Tiny.
tiny. This is by discipline. This is by discipline, goes through by person on there as to how much would be added in. So when we do that, and we pop that in, you'll see the SLPs get that sort of 6% increase. And this is the number I want to call to your attention. As we bake that in, from our side, that is the equivalent of a 0.75 COLA. So that is something that we are really looking to get into the new schedule. Okay, other than that, you don't have to negotiate step advancements, you just get them. So let's pop that in there as well. So we're gonna put in step advancements and we'll see that this number has now ticked up on us, not surprisingly. And I'm gonna pause there for a minute and take a look back down at this number here. So we have now gone, right, over $1.25 million with several of the spaces looking kind of daunting, right? What we would have to go through to do. And it's at this point that I want to particularly call out tier 1 and tier 2 and call back to when I said what our goals were, that third goal about maintaining affordability for districts, to make sure that we're really clear what this means. Our districts are not obligated to get these services from us. If our costs go too high, they will pull the services. We have been having some really difficult conversations with them as to where we currently are and where the costs are. And we do know that we're going to hit a ceiling with them sometime soon, where they will start saying, we're not sure that the ESD is the right place to be doing this. And where we have to be particularly mindful is in the tier 2 services. So in tier 2, it is selected every year. So tier 1 kind of rolls forward and we maintain a certain amount of labor to accomplish objectives on there. Tier 2 districts just say, hey, I could use a little extra. Can you give to me on there? And instantly, when we pop a new price in front of them on there, that's when they have their moment where they say, gosh, not sure that I actually want to take on that cost. So we have to be really cautious with tier 2 on a short-term basis. We have to be very cautious with tier 1 on a slightly longer term basis, again, knowing that if our programs get too expensive and they feel they can do it cheaper themselves, they will stop doing it through the ESD.
And those are a lot of different licensed groups. So behavior consultants have support liaisons. I believe there's some school site time that's sold, some SLP time that's sold. So it's not just one or two groups. It kind of spans the whole agency.
Okay, so what we will essentially do from here, as we start working on where we're going to be on the economic proposals, we're going to keep sharing this space with you on here so you can see what we're looking at. You don't have to agree with us in how we interpret it on there, but we want to be transparent as to why it is we're coming in with the positions that we come in with. We originally were going to put our first proposal for both COLA and insurance cap in front of you today. However, based off of what you're looking for in Article 6, there are some really serious cost implications to that we have to work through and figure out what kind of impacts those will have here before we can actually put a proposal in front of you that we can stay behind long term. So with that, it's a lot of information on here. Is there any questions on this side of the table on here? Anything I can answer or clarify for you?
It's helpful to see it all on the sheet. Thank you for sharing that. Can we get a copy of this, like maybe like a non-editable one, or like, is there a way to get it digital?
So I am happy to sit down with all of you for as long as you want and pour through numbers on here, but I am going to keep this one in my control. I hope you can appreciate that 9 columns representing our organization is a gross oversimplification of what we have. And so in terms of if we want to talk about the what ifs, I want to make sure that I'm able to actually bake them in here appropriately. So again, I'll sit down for as long as anybody wants to go through it on here, but I'll sort of keep that there. When it comes time to proposals on there, we will give you the full things in terms of where's the impact per discipline on here. We have impacts per person, and we'll roll through to the salary schedules as well. And as we do those along the way, we'll share them with you as well.
Do you think we could do a printed copy? I know you don't want to edit it and obviously it's living and breathing, but
So let's do this. I am gonna need some time to go through Article 6 and get the Article 6 stuff.
Yeah.
Cost it out and figure out what it is. I think after we can come to an understanding as to what we can and can't do with Article 6 on there, we'll probably be at a stage where I can do something like that, where we can sort of share. Once we've baked in a set of things and we understand what they are, I can give you sort of a hard print of what it would look like from here.
I think we are gonna take you up on sitting with you and going through it too, because what's different for us in negotiations with the ESD versus a district is we just have a different level of access for some of this information. And so if this was a district, we would have our own version of this. It's just really hard to get this level, as you know.
Yep.
So we are a bit reliant on you all for like your information, and it helps us cost appropriately too. So
Yep.
we're asking within a scope of reason.
Yep.
So I totally understand that, but yes, we'll take you up on your offer of sitting with you, or if there's a version of it. That is sort of. You think appropriate to share with us, yeah, even on paper.
Yep.
It's really appreciated.
Yeah, happy to do it. This will, like I said, our budget should drop on the website on May 1st, and this will come super close to tying out to what you'll see on there. So you'll be able to have that in there, and these, all of the numbers on here are in good faith on here. They really are our best attempt to share with you where we actually think we stand.
Do you want to go back for a sec to that? You have the page with all the professions listed and the
Mhm.
percentage.
Yep. So that would be, and I haven't, so this is after you make steps in, right? So it would say, behavior consultants, the steps that you get from there will give them a 2% increase. As opposed to, the OTAs, who won't see nearly as much because such a high percentage of them are already on their top step.
And can we go back to the main overview too?
Sure.
The insurance tab.
Questions, clarifications, things you want to look at more in depth?
I think that's a great
Okay.
starting point.
Okay, great.
I think it would be helpful for us to take some of that information and then also address the questions that you had mentioned,
Mhm.
During caucus. Then we can return it like 7:50 to close up and
And just kind of.
plan for next steps.
Yep.
Anything else from? Okay, yeah, so like 7:50.
Yeah.
Can go back.
You do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.